Hello and welcome to this edition of the Dean's Video Newsletter. Today we're going to be talking about our distributed medical education network and the changes that will be coming down the pike on this over the course of the next 6 months to a year. However, this is a process that's been at play now for almost 3 years, and I want to walk you through today a little bit about why we're doing this, what are the objectives that we're hoping to achieve at the end of the day, and what do I see as the advantages to evolving our program from where it stands right now, because we've definitely been one of the leaders in Canada in distributed education. So what are the advantages to what we're proposing to do? One needs to actually step back a little bit and look at the history of healthcare in Canada, but more importantly, the history in Ontario. Over the course of the late 1990s to early 2000, there was almost a doubling to a tripling in the number of individuals in the province who were without primary care physicians. Our government looked at that very seriously, and at about the same time there were a series of reports that were beginning to come out that suggested that the vast majority of patients would actually see their care delivered somewhere else other than an academic healthcare centre. And in fact, less than 1% of our population ever ends up in a tertiary or quaternary care centre. So the bulk of care, for about a third of our population that requires it, is in the community. So the question started to arise. Why are our programs not there for education? Why is it that we are not getting physicians to take up careers in the communities and in rural areas for that? And so the government addressed that. And there were clearly a number of issues underlying that. But one of the key ones that became evident early on is that if a trainee spends time in a rural community, has significant exposure and meaningful exposure there to it, they are far more likely to return to that community to practice medicine. So that began the 2000s. And during that time, Jim Rourke, who's now the Dean at Newfoundland, and Carol Herbert, who was my predecessor as Dean here, really took the mantle for moving Schulich forward as one of the lead centres in Canada for developing a distributed medical education program. It's been one that's been phenomenal. We've had great success in seeing more students take up careers in the rural areas, but no program is stable over time. It has to evolve. We have to begin looking at what are the next levels to move forward to. So that moves us into this era. And in this era, we have a few more problems that are starting to arise for us. You know, the time of expansion and additional funding coming forward from the government is now done. Right? So we've had tremendous growth. We managed that growth beautifully for it. So how do we continue to develop an academic program and make it a meaningful experience for our preceptors and for our students and our communities in a time when resources are shrinking? We're also having a lot of discussion about competency-based training, and it's really well beyond a discussion about it. This is a fact. It's going to be coming within the next 3 to 5 years that virtually all of our programs are going to be looking at the licensing or the accreditation of our students at the graduate level based on competencies. Well, if less than 1% of your population is getting their care in an acute care centre, such as here, and the majority are receiving it out in the community, where should their competence be derived from? So those questions we don't have the answers to yet, but we're going to have the answers as this evolves. So our models need to change. In addition to that, we have a tremendous cadre of physicians in our communities and healthcare providers who are now the primary teachers of many of our students. Right? So we now need to start to ask the questions about what does it mean to be an educator in a distributed system of education for you in terms of your career development, your continuous learning, your continuous professional development. So we have a responsibility to that. The system that we have currently really looks at 3 different sources by which we provide those resources. We have our Windsor program, we have SWOMEN, and then we have our family medicine program, one of the most established programs in the country and a leader in there. And all of those programs have tremendous linkages back to their preceptors and their communities. So rule number 1, we don't want to disturb that. Right? One of the things that we have heard repeatedly as we've gone through this process, and indeed it's been 3 years of consultation and planning to get to this point, is that one of the tremendous values that we have as a school is not that we have a distributed education program or a curriculum that's there. It's that we have a tremendously dedicated cadre of teachers who see themselves as part of our school. So here's what we're looking at doing. We're looking at taking our entire geographic region, and so this really is from Goderich to Windsor and all points in between. It's southwestern Ontario. We've got water on 3 sides, right? And then we've got Kitchener, Waterloo, McMaster, and Toronto on the 4th side. So everything in that area is where we teach our students. Increasingly, on the hospital sector side of the equation, it's where we're going to be delivering our care closer to the coalface, to use a common colloquialism around that. So how do we now take those regions and move our education system out into that? Well, our solution is to look at clusters, right? Clearly defined regions within that. So there'll be somewhere between 5 and 7. That discussion is still ongoing as we speak, where each of those clusters is going to have a responsibility for not only the training of the undergraduate students, but the graduate students, and for developing continuous professional development programs and CME programs within their regions. We're going to work to help support all of those, so everybody's going to be linked back into a larger program, which is part of our Schulich Distributed Education Network. Right? This includes dentistry, it includes medicine in there, and increasingly, right, as the university moves to e-learning, right, it will provide a foundation that we can look at with that as well. We're not expecting that each one will look the same. In fact, we would have failed at this if we have 5 to 7 different clusters that are identical. Right? We have tremendous geographic variability across our region. We have tremendous populations from industry to academic through to Aboriginal. We need to address that each of those hubs reflects that in a slightly different way. So the program should reflect it a slightly different way for it. So over the next while, what you'll see is that we've now moved past the consultation level with this to starting to do the implementation components to that. We're going to do it incredibly cautiously. This will be completed by 2015, probably towards the end of the year. You'll start to see changes that are occurring now. It's going to be highly consultative as we make the changes so that we don't cause too many ripples in the pond. This is not something we could afford to make a mistake at. This is a critical piece of our teaching paradigm. So we want to get it right. We want to be listening as we're moving forward, as we have for the last 2.5 to 3 years putting it together. But it will be done. We have to be able to address this in a different manner than we're doing it now, and to move it forward so that we continue to be Canada's leaders in distributed education, and both at the medical as well as the dental level of all of this. I don't underestimate the amount of time and effort our communities are bringing forward on this. And at the very beginning of this, I just want to say thank you tremendously from all of us here, but particularly from me. This is a commitment that we're making to the school, and when we're done, our school is going to look different for this. But I think it's going to look stronger and is going to maintain that international plateau that was so carefully built by our predecessors. So thank you very much. I look forward to talking to you again. If I don't see you again before the summer, enjoy. Take care.